History is built on contradictions. Some leaders are visionaries, others are tyrants. But what about those who were both? They lifted nations from the brink of collapse, only to rule them with an iron fist. They inspired millions, yet silenced dissent with ruthless precision. Were they saviors or oppressors? Heroes or villains? Or just really bad at sharing power? If their nations thrived, does that make their methods justifiable? Or does absolute power always come with a fine print of tyranny? Today, we unravel the paradox of charismatic tyrants who shape the world through vision, force, and fear. What makes people rally behind a leader? Is it charisma, fear, hope? Throughout history, certain figures have commanded loyalty, admiration, and terror, all at once. But what exactly do they have in common? A grand vision for the future? Unshakable confidence, sometimes crossing into megalomania? The power to inspire, persuade, or manipulate the masses? Ruthless suppression of opposition? And what happens when their promises of greatness come at the expense of freedom? These leaders don't rise in times of peace. They emerge from chaos, wars, revolutions, economic collapse. But why do desperate societies turn to strongmen? Is it simply a need for order? Does human nature crave the illusion of control, even under oppression? Or maybe we are just really bad at picking group project leaders. Let's examine some of history's most famous charismatic tyrants. Few figures in history are as paradoxical as Napoleon. "Power is my mistress," he once said, which is a very poetic way of admitting he had control issues. Rising from the ashes of the French Revolution, he seized power in 1799 and crowned himself emperor in 1804. An act that symbolized his absolute authority. Under Napoleon, France saw remarkable progress. He implemented the Napoleonic Code, a legal system still used in parts of the world today. He expanded education and centralized government power. His military strategies were revolutionary, making France the dominant power in Europe. But ambition consumed him. His wars reshaped the continent and left millions dead. He was a brilliant tactician, yet his thirst for conquest led to his downfall. Exiled once, then again. Was he the savior of France, or did he betray its revolutionary ideals? Did his genius justify his brutality, or did it ultimately doom him? The Ottoman Empire was crumbling. Enter Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. His mission? A new Turkey. But at what cost? His vision was clear: modernity, secularism, and nationalism. He abolished the caliphate, separating religion from government. He implemented sweeping reforms, new laws, a new alphabet, and a push for industrialization. Women's rights advanced under his rule, with women gaining voting rights decades before many Western nations. But progress came at a cost. Political opposition was crushed, and religious groups were suppressed. His iron-fisted approach ensured rapid modernization, but at the expense of cultural and religious traditions that had existed for centuries. Was his iron-fisted approach the only way forward? Or could Turkey have modernized without sacrificing so much of its cultural identity? Long before emperors ruled Rome, it was a republic. Then came Julius Caesar, a military genius, a populist, a man adored by the people, but feared by the Senate. Basically, the guy you'd want leading your army, but not necessarily writing your country's HR policies. He expanded Roman territories and initiated sweeping economic reforms. His declaration as dictator for life led to his assassination. Did Rome need Caesar's iron grip to transition into an empire, or did his ambition destroy the very system that made Rome great? His assassination led to years of turmoil, with Rome ultimately falling into the hands of emperors who wielded even more power. Could a more measured approach have saved the Republic, or was Rome always destined for an autocratic future? A brutal civil war, a divided nation. Out of the chaos, Francisco Franco emerged. For nearly 40 years, he ruled Spain with an iron grip. He brought economic stability and modernization. His rule prevented Spain from falling into another civil war, but his government was oppressive. Opposition was silenced, and human rights abuses were rampant. Even after his death, Spain remained divided on his legacy. Did Franco save Spain from chaos, or did he simply suppress it under authoritarian rule? His policies, though harsh, ultimately led to economic growth, but at the cost of a population living in fear. Would Spain have thrived under a democratic system sooner, or was Franco's rule the only way to maintain order? No leader is more polarizing than Joseph Stalin. He transformed the Soviet Union from an agrarian society into an industrial superpower. His leadership during World War II was crucial in defeating Nazi Germany. The USSR became a global superpower under his rule. But the cost? Mass purges, forced labor camps, famine, millions perished. Stalin's rule was brutal, yet undeniably shaped world history. Can a leader be both a monster and a visionary? His ruthless industrialization policies propelled the USSR into the modern era, but at what cost? The millions who suffered and perished under his rule paint a grim picture, yet his supporters argue that without him, the Soviet Union might never have become a superpower. Was he a necessary force in history, or a monster who reshaped the world through terror? Gamal Abdel Nasser is hailed as a hero of anti-colonialism, but his rule was also deeply authoritarian. He nationalized the Suez Canal, standing up to Western powers. He promoted pan-Arabism, inspiring movements across the Middle East. His government brought land reforms and modernization to Egypt. However, he also jailed political opponents and cracked down on dissent. His attempts to unify the Arab world often led to conflicts, and his economic policies, while ambitious, did not always succeed. Did Nasser's dream of Arab unity justify his authoritarian rule, or did his failure to achieve true unity expose the inherent flaws in his approach? Singapore, a tiny island, no resources, no stability. Then came Lee Kuan Yew, a man who took micromanagement to a whole new level. Under his leadership, Singapore transformed from a struggling port into a global financial powerhouse, known for its low corruption, high education standards, and booming economy. But prosperity came at a price. Political dissent, silenced. Opposition leaders, lawsuits and imprisonment. The press, heavily controlled. Public discourse, strictly regulated. And let's not forget the laws, really strict laws. Chewing gum, banned, graffiti, prison, jaywalking, not worth it. Some saw this as necessary discipline. Others saw it as an iron grip on personal freedoms. Supporters hail him as the architect of Singapore's success, crediting his firm hand for the nation's meteoric rise. Critics argue that his policies fostered an environment of fear, conformity, and restricted freedoms. Did Singapore need an iron-fisted leader to become an economic powerhouse, or could it have succeeded without the loss of political freedoms? History forces us to wrestle with difficult questions. What does it mean to be a great leader? Can absolute power ever be wielded without corruption? And if stability is achieved at the cost of freedom, is it truly stability at all? These are the dilemmas we must confront when examining the legacies of these leaders. As you reflect on their impact, consider this. Do the ends ever truly justify the means? Or was there always another path history could have taken? Can authoritarian rule ever be necessary? Or is it simply the price societies are willing to pay for stability? And why, time and again, do people turn to strongman leaders in moments of crisis? The answers aren't simple, because history rarely is. Each of these leaders left behind legacies that shape nations, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. Their impact is undeniable, but their methods remain a source of debate. Their rule is a lesson in the complexities of power, how leadership can bring both prosperity and suffering in equal measure. History is not black and white, it's a collection of paradoxes. These leaders unified nations, yet their rule often came at a terrible cost. So, we leave you with one final question. Would you rather live under a stable dictatorship or an unstable democracy? Let us know in the comments below.